Last time we talked about independent t-test. With the independent t-test, we had two groups and we were comparing the scores of those two groups. One key element was that the two groups were independent of each other. In other words, we had participants in group 1 that could not overlap with the participants of group 2. We were looking at those two groups separately, compared the means to see if one was significantly different than the other, if maybe one was larger than the other or maybe smaller. But we looked at those groups as a whole and compared them. Today we're going to talk about dependent t-test. With dependent t-test, we have the same participants that we measure some kind of attribute or characteristic multiple times. Usually that is defined as a pre-test and post-test, or maybe scores in time 1 and scores in time 2. Usually we do have some kind of intervention or instruction, something going on between those two periods when we capture that attribute or that characteristic. For example, here we have the scores of 20 students. In time 1, we capture their test anxiety score maybe at the beginning of the semester. With instruction, maybe they took a test, which was their midterm. We tried to capture that later on and see how that anxiety changed during time 2. Again, there was something that happened between time 1 and time 2 that may have impacted their anxiety score. Now, the key piece here is that we want to make sure that the scores match the participants. So for example, if we have Johnny, this is Johnny's score in time 1, and this is Johnny's score in time 2. If this is Sarah, again, this is Sarah's score in time 1, and this is Sarah's score in time 2. Again, we do have to match those scores by participant. If we have 20 students and we have their scores for time 1, and again we measure them 2 months later, 5 months later, and we have their scores in time 2, but there's no way to pair up which score time 1 goes with which score time 2, then there's not much that we can do with that data. So again, we want to make sure that we're pairing each score or each measurement across participants. So we're looking to see if there are significant differences between time 1 and time 2. Just like with the independent t-test, we can talk about significant differences, or we can hypothesize that maybe one score is higher than the other. In our particular case, we were talking about test anxiety. So we were hopeful that with time, our anxiety is going to decrease. So a possible hypothesis would be that the time 1 scores will be significantly higher than the time 2 scores. But just a hypothesis. Let's stick with our non-directional hypothesis, and let's say that we want to see if there are significant differences in the scores of test anxiety between time 1 and time 2. To do that in SPSS, what we need to do is we're going to go under Analyze, go down to Compare Means, and we're going to click on Paired Samples t-test. Paired samples t-test, we need those pairs. That's very, very important in this test. So here are two variables. So we need variable 1 and variable 2. We it doesn't really matter in what order we're gonna put them, but if you all you have to do is just be careful with your interpretation. That's all there is to it. So let's say I want to use temp1 as my variable 1, and the way I do it is I just click on it and drag it over to the place where I want it to go. So my variable 2 would be the time2 test scores. And we're gonna go ahead and click OK. Okay. And here's